Bava Kamma Daf Kuf Tez Vav continues the Gemara's discussion of the handling of stolen property. Somebody stole something and sells it. The victim, does he have to claim it from the first or from the second, and other dinim in stolen property? So the Gemara begins 3 lines down with a case. If Shimon sold something to Levi, and then it was discovered that Shimon had stolen it from Reuven, who does Reuven go to? Does Reuven go to the thief, Shimon, to get his money back, or does Reuven go to Levi, the purchaser, and then Levi has to go get his money back from Shimon, who sold him stolen property? So once it's machlekes, Rav, in the name of Rav Chia, says that Reuven has to go to Shimon, he has to go to the thief and deal with him. And Rav Yechon, in the name of Rav Yanai, says he has to go to the purchaser, he has to go to Levi and try to get it back from him, and then Levi will have to go claim the money from the person who sold it to him. Instead of Yosef, they're not arguing. One is talking about where Levi bought it from Shimon before Yish, before Reuven was ever Miyayish, and therefore it's not Levi's. He has no right to hold on to that. He acquired it be'isser, and he has to give it back to Reuven, and then it's his own problem to go get his money back from the thief who sold it to him. The other opinion, which says that Reuven goes to Shimon, is referring to where it was after Yish, and therefore Levi acquired it legally, and Reuven has to get it back from Shimon, and it's only Shimon who has to deal with him as having been the thief from him. Now, says Gemara, both opinions agree with Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said that if Shimon steals something and Reuven was not Meyayish yet, and then somebody else comes and eats it, so that person is taking what he was not Meyayish. They're both a thief from him, and he could go claim from either one. So they each hold this way that they could claim from either one. Now, in our Mishnah we saw that if you don't know who the thief was, then Levi has to give it back to Reuven, but Reuven has to pay Levi for it. That's the concise shock. That's because otherwise people wouldn't be able to buy anything. But here we know who the thief is, then you have to go to the original thief. Says Abaye, but it's not true that they'll agree with Rav Chisda. They seem to argue on Rav Chisda, and I'll show you a case where Rav argues on Rav Chisda. That's the case of Manas Kahuna. That's the case where somebody didn't give the proper thing to a kohen. So one of the Manas Kahuna is the keva, one of the innards of a cow. Now we have a halacha. If Shimon sells the innards of a cow to Levi, and among them is the Manas Kahuna, which really have been given to Reuven the kohen. So Levi, who bought it, has to go give it to the kohen, and he does not subtract from the money that he pays to Shimon, because it's assumed that the sale price did not include the keva, and therefore he didn't sell it. He just has to transfer it to the possession of the kohen. Now, if, however, he bought it for him by weight, he weighed it out and paid for that, then when Levi has to give it to the kohen, he did pay for the keva, and therefore he can't subtract the value from Shimon. So you see that Levi is going back to Shimon, but the kohen is getting it directly from Levi. So Levi is giving to the kohen. Now here it's considered to be lefnei yish, because the kohen is not meyayish. Now in this, Rav says this is only talking about where the purchaser, where Levi weighed it out for himself. If, however, Shimon weighed it out for him, then the kohen, Reuven, has to go to the thief, the one who didn't give it to him, who should have given it to him, to Shimon, to get the payment from him. He cannot go to Levi directly. So you see, there's a case of lefnei yish, and yet Rav is clearly saying not like Rav Chisda, just like he says here that you go to the thief and not to the one who bought it from the thief. And therefore it doesn't seem to fit with Rav Chisda. So the answer is no. When it says that the din is with the tabach, that he has to go to Shimon, the seller, it means even him. It could even go to him. It could also go to Levi, but also to Shimon, and therefore he's really holding you could go to the two of them, which is what Rav Chisda says. It's a chiddush because I would have thought the kohen's possession of Manas Kuna is stronger, and there's no yish there, because it's given to him from Shemayim. So Kamash Malon, that no, he still needs to go to the tabach. Now, says Gemara, according to Abaye, there's the one who said that they do argue, that Rav and Rav Yechon are arguing about whether Reuven could claim it from Shimon or from Levi. So what would the machlokes be about? So Gemara has a few explanations. First one I want to say it's about Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says that you can claim from Levi as well. Levi who purchased it, you have a right to claim from him. Rav does not hold of Rav Chisda, and therefore Rav says you have to go to the first one, to Shimon, and Rav Yechon holds of Rav Chisda, and therefore says you can go to Levi. Our second explanation is Rav Zvid, who says that the machlokes is in a case where the yish came after the Shin Rishos, that is, after Shimon sold it to Levi, then the owner was Mi'ayish, then Reuven was Mi'ayish. The question is, does that work to give acquisition to Levi? Everyone agrees in the case of Shini Rishus of Yish first and then Shini Rishus. That's if the Reuven was Mi'ayish while it was still in Shimon's possession, and then he sold it to Levi. Everybody would agree there that Levi was kind of it, but here it was the reverse, and that's a machlekes, is that kind of or not? According to one, yes. According to the other, makes no difference. Gemara's third shot is of Papa completely changes understanding of this Gemara. He says the stolen object itself, everyone agrees, like Rav Chizda, goes back to the owner, goes back to Reuven. Reuven could claim either from Levi or from Shimon, whoever he wants. Levi has it; he can claim directly from him. We're not discussing Yish. That's irrelevant. The question is, who does Levi claim from? After he lost it, who does he get his money back from? So that's what this machlekes is. Rav Mishmei Rav Chia says he goes back to the Rishon, that is, he goes back to Shimon. He can't go back to Reuven, he can't go back to the Baal Bayis. And he does not hold of any takanas hashuk. However, Rav Yechon holds there is a takanas hashuk, which means that we want to protect Levi as a buyer in the open market. They have his investment be secure, otherwise people aren't going to buy. And therefore we say that if it gets removed from him, because it turns out that it was actually stolen, he can go back to Reuven and collect the money from him. And there he doesn't have to try to get it away from Shimon, who he bought it from, Shimon, who the thief was. Now, the Gemara asks, is it true that Rav doesn't hold of this takanas hashuk? Well, Rav Huna was a Talmud of Rav. An incident where he did paskin that Levi can go back to Reuven and get the money from him. The case of there was that there was a famous evil person by the name of Hanan, Bisha Hanan the wicked, and he stole clothing and he sold it. And the thief came for Rav Huna. He said, what could I do? And he said to the original owner, he said that you can go and claim it from him. He said, go pay for your mashkan, meaning go give the money for the thing that you want to get back from the person who's holding it. So you see there is the takanas hashuk going to Rav Huna was a Talmud of Rav. So my answer is different because it was Hanan Bisha. He's a very powerful guy. It was impossible to get anything out of him. And therefore, it's like a case where the thief is not known. The thief is not known. We've seen it in our Mishnah, because as the takanas hashuk, you can take it back from the original owner. You can ask him to pay the money that he had spent on that. As the purchaser, Levi can ask Reuven to give him the money that he spent to buy it. Now, Rava says, halacha, if the thief is well known as a thief, then there is not takanas hashuk, because Levi should not have bought it from a thief. It's his own fault for buying from a thief, and he loses it. So Gemara says, but our case, Hanan Bisha was very well known as an evil guy. So how come he is allowed to claim it back from Reuven? So Gemara answers, Hanan Bisha was known as a bad guy, but he was known as a thief. So Levi bought it from him. He could not have expected that it would be stolen. Now, the Gemara brings a case of somebody stole an object and used it to pay off a loan or used it to pay off a purchase that he made and hadn't fully paid for. And now it turned out that it was stolen and the person who received it has to give it up. Is there a takanas hashuk here that he gets it back, that he gets money that he's owed back? So Gemara says no. Everybody agrees in that case is no takanas hashuk, because when he gave the original loan or credit, it was not in exchange for this object. And the concept of takanas hashuk is only to say that when you buy something, you have to be secure that you're receiving what you bought, and you're protected from losing it if it was a stolen object. Here, you never intended to acquire an object. You intended to make a loan, and therefore you don't have to protect what he's going to receive in exchange for that. There was never any understanding that this is an exchange, that he's actually purchasing this. Now, what happens if Shimon owes money to Levi and he gives him a stolen object as a mashkanta, as a collateral, as a security? And so, if he collects it as a security, is there takanas hashuk protecting that when it's found to be stolen? So, here the Gemara says it depends what the value is. If the standard procedure was followed and that the mashkan is worth more than the loan, so let's say the loan was 100, the mashkan is worth 200, so then everybody, you see that when Levi made the loan, he was expecting to get a mashkan, and it was only because he knew about the mashkan, and therefore he's relying on receiving his repayment from the mashkan. You need to have takanas hashuk. However, if it was equal value, which is not the standard procedure, he must have trusted him, because no one gives a loan based on a equal value security. So should you have takanas hashuk there, or is he really trusting him? You don't need to protect his investment then, because he's not really expecting the mashkan, so there's no takanas hashuk on that. So there's a machlekes. A Meimar says there's no takanas hashuk. Mazodra says there still is takanas hashuk. Now, in a case where it was a sale, which is the standard case that we've seen before, so there it's the opposite. As we saw before, if it's an equal normal sale value for value, then there is takanas hashuk. That's a standard case. If, however, he sold it for much more, so then you're obviously giving him a gift in the extra money. It's reasonable to say that there's no need for takanas hashuk, because just like the extra is a gift, the main thing is also a gift, and the money you receive in exchange is not really a payment for it. So there Rav Sheshes says there's no takanas hashuk, and Rava says there is takanas hashuk. Says the Gemara halach l'maisa, in all situations there is takanas hashuk, except for the person who stole and paid off his loan or paid off his credit. That's the one situation which is no takanas hashuk, because, as we said, he's not receiving anything in exchange for the money that he gives or the credit that he extends. Okay, now the Gemara brings two incidents that relate to this halacha. So the first one is that Avimi bar Nazi, who was the father-in-law of Ravina, was owed money by a certain individual. He was owed 4 zuz. That individual he stole a shirt from someone, and he came and he gave it to Avini as a security for the 4 zuz that he owed him. And since he had gotten that back, so Avini felt confident enough to lend him another 4 zuz, which is what he wanted, and that's why he gave him the shirt. Now, it was not specified if the collateral was meant to be collateral for the first 4 zuz, and then he gave him the second 4 zuz without collateral, or if this collateral was meant to cover all 4 zuz. And that's an afkamina when it was found out that the object was a stolen object. So it found out that it was a stolen object, and now the question is, was it securing the first loan, or was it securing both loans? So they came to Ravina, who was the son-in-law of Avimi, and he said this mashkin was for both loans, for each set of 4 zuz, and therefore the first one was paying back the loan, and therefore it is a case of somebody who is paying back with a stolen object. As we said, there's no takanas hashuk there, so that he can't help. However, the second loan was a mashkanta, was a security, and there is takanas hashuk, and therefore he should return the stolen object to its owner, and that person should give him the 4 zuz that he had lent for that security. So the Gemara asks, the Gemara says, Rav Kohen asked, how do you know? Maybe the security was only for the first 4, and as we said, there's no takanas hashuk for that because that's paying off the loan. And the last 4 he gave without a security. He trusted him. Just like the first time he gave him 4, he trusted him. The second time he gave him 4, he also trusted him after he had already gotten the first 4 returned. If that would be true, then there's no security for that, and then there's no reason that he should get that back from the original owner of the stolen object that has nothing to do with the thing that he secured. So the question went around back and forth, and it ended up coming before Rabbi Avo, and he said that the halacha is like Rav Kohen, and he does not get anything for the second 4 zuz, and for the first 4 zuz either, because it's takanas hashuk. Now, the Gemara brings another case where you had the seller sold to another seller. So here the case was you had Ruvain. He owned a sefer. Along came someone who was a Narsha from Narsha. He stole the sefer from Ruvain. He sold it to a Papuna, somebody from Papuna, and he sold it for 80 zuz. Then the Papuna went and sold it to somebody from Mechuzah, so he was in Mechuzah. He sold it for 120 zuz. Then it was found to be a stolen object. It was the theft was uncovered, and now the question is, how much does the person who paid for it, the Mechuzah who bought it now, he has 120 zuz, he paid for it. How much does he get back from Reuven, the original owner? So Abaye went, so the case came to Abaye, and Abaye said that the original owner has to pay only 80 zuz, because the amount that he has to pay is the amount that the thief stole it from him received. Since, had it still been by him, he could have received that from the thief. The thief got 80 zuz for it, so therefore the original owner has to pay 80 zuz for it. Now, even though the person he's taken away from paid 120 zuz. So that extra money, he has to go back to the thief and he has to deal with him himself. Rava asked them what happened to takanas hashuk. If they made a takanas hashuk to protect the buyer, they certainly should make takanas hashuk to protect the buyer from the buyer. And therefore, he says what happens is as follows. Reuven, the original owner, goes to claim it from the mechuzah. He has to pay him 120 zuz to give him full takanas hashuk. Now he can only claim 80 from the thief. So he goes to the 80 and claims So he goes to the thief and claims 80. Then he has to go to the papuna, to the one who bought it from him, and he's the one who made the extra 40, and he has to get that 40 from him. Now we get our next Mishnah, and we have here a case we've seen many times out the Masechta with a different psach though, as well as another similar case. So the first case is where you have two people that are walking, they get into an accident. One has a barrel of wine, one has a barrel of honey. The honey is worth much more than the wine. However, the barrel of honey cracked and is being ruined, it's falling out. So the owner of the wine said, I'm going to pour out, he pours out his wine, loses that, and uses the barrel to save the honey, to store the honey. And then he comes to the owner of the honey, he says, now I want you to pay me for my wine that I had to throw out in order to save your honey. So this Mishnah paskins, if he didn't say anything, then he doesn't get payment for his wine. He just gets for the kli that he gave him, and for the work, for the labor that he did to save the guy's honey. Now, if he specified and he said, I'm pouring out my wine in order to save your honey, you're going to pay me for my wine, then he does have to pay him for the wine. Similar cases, if a river swept away two donkeys, his own donkey, your own donkey, is worth 100 zuz, and the other one that got swept away is worth 200 zuz. You can only save one, and you save the 200 zuz one. And then you want to go to the guy and say, pay me for my 100 zuz donkey. So if he didn't say anything in advance, then you only get the payment for the work that you did. However, if you specified in advance, then you do get repayment for your 100 zuz that you lost, saving his donkey and losing your donkey. We now begin the Gemara. The Gemara asks, in the case where he didn't say anything, why should he lose his wine? Why can't he not say to the owner of the honey, your honey was hefker. There was no way that you could save it if not for me, and therefore it's hefker, and I now own your honey. I can return it to you in exchange for my wine, at least if you want, but the honey is mine. So the Gemara wants to prove that that's the case. The Gemara says, we learned in the Brisa that somebody was carrying jugs of wine and oil, and he saw that they're about to break, and he's going to lose them. So he's not allowed to say, oh, what's in it is truma or meiser on the fruits that I have in my house. In this way, making it a loss for truma and for meiser instead of for himself. So he's not allowed to say that, and if he said it, it's not chal. Now, what would be the reason? It must be because he's not the owner anymore. Since it's about to spill, it's hefker. And therefore, in this case also, the guy whose honey is spilling out is hefker, and then the other person, the owner of the wine who saved it, should say that now it's mine. Gemara says, like Rav Yirmiyah answered in a different case, I'll answer here as well, you're not really going to lose everything. There was a wrap around the jugs that saves most of the things that are dripping. You'll drip out a little bit here and there, but you're not going to lose everything at once, and therefore it's not hefker. That's what we're referring to in our case. Now, so the Gemara says, now why is the halacha that if he said that it's truma, that it's not chal? Didn't we learn in the Brisa somebody's traveling on the way and he has money in his hand and he sees that there's a robber coming to him? He shouldn't say, okay, so the fruits that are meiser or truma that have in my house are mechulol, the fruits that are meiser are mechulol on this, turning this into meiser sheni money, and that way he'll save himself. At least if the money will be stolen from him, he won't lose things that he could use. So he's not allowed to say that. And if he says that, though, it is chal. So how come in our case we say that the truma is not chal? So my answer is the case here is where he could save it. That's why it is chal. So Gemara says if he could save it, why is he not allowed to say so? The answer is because he can only save it like the chak, and it seems there's going to be some loss in all events. The Gemara asks him that, is it true that if there is a small loss, because it's Yochel Hatzal only Yidei Adchak, is it true that you're not allowed to do that lechatchila? If a Brisa that says somebody who's a Levi and he has 10 barrels of Meiser wine, which is Tevel to Trumas Meiser, he has to take at least one of them and make it Trumas Meiser, and then he sees that one of them is breaking or got uncovered. Now the wine is uncovered, it's Giloi, which means you're not allowed to drink it. So he's allowed to say that this one is Trumas Meiser for the other 9. And if it be oil, he's not allowed to do that because that causes a loss to the kite. Now, the understanding over here is that it's tamei truma, and therefore there's nothing the kohen could do with it anyway. He can't drink it. The only thing he could do with it is sprinkle it on the floor in order to give a good smell to the house. We're going to say later that it's new wine, and therefore it's not even very good for that good smell. So it's a very limited value and very limited loss, and therefore he's allowed to make the kohen lose that amount by saying that this is the Trumas Meiser one. However, oil, which could still be used to light, is much more valuable, and therefore he's not allowed to do that because that's too much of a loss for the kohen. So you see here, for a small loss, he's allowed to make it Truma. So the Gemara answers Well, this is the case. This is where Rabbi Yirmiyah said that it's not really much of a loss because you have the wrap that's wrapped around it and it's going to save it. You're not going to lose it too much. Now, the Gemara asks, what use is there if it was Giloi? Now, if it's broken, so whatever you save, you could save. But if it's Giloi, you're not allowed to use it to sprinkle on the floor. We have a brisa that says that water that became Giloi, you're not allowed to pour it into Rosh Hashanah. You're not allowed to use it to make cement, to mix it with sand. You're not allowed to use it to settle the dirt on the floor of the house. You're not allowed to serve it to your animals as drink, not your animals and not your friends' animals. Because, again, Gila, there's always a fear that there are snake venom in it. And in any of these circumstances, the snake venom could hurt somebody. And therefore, in our case, you can't use it to sprinkle around the house to give a good smell because it has the snake venom in it. So the Gemara answers, we're talking about where it's filterable. Now, there's a machlekes if the snake venom can be filtered out of the wine or not. If you put it in an upper kli that is suspended over a lower kli and it's dripping to the lower kli, will the venom pass from the upper to the lower? Nechemia holds it will not. And there's a Tana Kamma in a brisa that says that it will. The brisa there is discussing, if you have a setup like this, do you have to cover the lower kli, or can you assume anything which drips into it from the upper kli must have filtered out the venom and it's going to be in the upper kli? So Rabbi Nechemia says if the lower kli is not covered, you don't have a problem. If the lower kli is not exposed, you don't have a problem because the venom has to stay in the upper kli. It can't pass through this filter arrangement. So therefore here also you'll just filter it out. The Gemara asks, no, Rabbi Nechemia only said that in a situation where it's set up in this filter situation with this kli suspended above the lower kli before the venom gets in there and it filters on its own. However, if a person has to pick it up, then it gets stirred around and it's going to be lost. Rabbi Nechemia says there you can't use this filter setup to do. Someone says, you're right, you can't use the filter setup to do. However, you could pour through a cloth and that will filter it. And the Gemara asks, if you're saying that it's from Nechemia, then how could you take truma from tamei on tamei? How could you take truma gedela? How could you take trumas meiser from tamei on a tamei? Nechemia holds you can't take truma from tamei on a tamei. Of a brisa says you're allowed to take from tamei on tamei. That the Tana Kamma says you're allowed to take from tamei and a tamei, from tahar on tahar and from tahar on tamei, but not from tamei on tahar. And Nechemia says even not from tamei on tamei. So you shouldn't be able to do this either, except for demai, since it's only a trum l'chumra. There you're allowed to. Demai is a suffix. So my answers here also we're talking about demai. The Gemara now establishes what we said earlier about the purpose of this tamei wine and oil. So the Gemara says, I understand oil you can't use because it's a loss to the kain because it has the value of being lit. So wine could also be used to scent the house. The Gemara says, maybe you'll say that scenting the house is not a real value. Not true. Shmuel says in the name of Reb Chia that it is a great value. Wine to drink, you pay a selah for a loig. Wine to sprinkle the house, you pay 2 selah for a loig. So you see it's even more valuable. So my answers, we're talking about new wine, which is not valuable for sprinkling. So says, no, you could just age it. But you can't age it because you're not allowed to keep tamei truma around. You may end up drinking it. So says, then how could you save the oil to light? You may end up eating that. So my answer is you keep it in a disgusting kli, you're not going to end up eating it. Why don't you keep the wine in a disgusting kli so you won't end up drinking it? Or says you can't because you want to use it to scent the house. It's not going to be useful to scent the house, so you're going to keep it in a disgusting kli. Or says, is it really concerned that you're not allowed to keep things around if they're tamei because you're going to end up eating it? It's a machlekes. We have brisa, a barrel of wine of truma that became tamei. Beis Shammai says you have to pour out the entire thing, and Beis Hillel says you can use it to sprinkle. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Ben Rav Yasi says, I'll be the deciding third factor here. It depends where you are. In the house, you're allowed to sprinkle. If it's in the field, then you have to pour it out. Into a different version, his answer was that if it is old wine, then you can use it to sprinkle, but if it's new wine, then you have to pour it out. So once they said to him, this is not a third opinion here. This is not a machriya between the two. This is a third opinion, and that's not machriya between the two, because now you just have 3 opinions as to what you're allowed to do, but that doesn't match with either of the other 2 from before.